Hello developers, welcome to day 25 of the 30 days of JavaScript challenge. Today presents another opportunity for us to tackle challenges and further enhance our understanding of JavaScript concepts. Let's dive in and maximize our learning journey. We're just 5 days away, so let's hold on to the finish. Today's challenge says, given two arrays, array 1 and array 2, return a new array called joint array, and all the objects in each of the two input arrays will contain an ID field that has an integer value. And the joint array is an array formed by merging array 1 and array 2 based on their ID key. The length of the joint array should be the length of unique values of ID. The returned array should be sorted in ascending order based on the ID key. Then it continues and says that if an ID exists in one array but not the other, the single object with that ID should be included in the result array without modification. Then if two objects share an ID, their properties should be merged into a single object. And if a key only exists in one object, that single key value pair should be included in the object. Then lastly, if a key is included in both objects, the value in the object from array 2 should override the value from array 1. So that is the challenge. So you can look at some examples. So let's say array 1 has two objects. The first object has an ID of 1, has a key of ID which has a value of 1, and a key of x which also has a value of 1. Then the second object has an ID of 2, has a key ID with a value 2, then it has a key x with a value 9. Then the second array is an array of one object with a key ID of value 3 and a key x value 5. So the output will be this, because since this ID is 1 here and each ID is individual, there is no duplicates, so it will just be one array containing each individual objects. Because you can see in the explanation there's no duplicate IDs, so array 1 is simply concatenated with array 2. They're just joining both arrays. But if you look at example 2 here, you can see this is array 1 and this is array 2, and you can notice that this ID 2 here, also you have another ID here 2. No, it's here ID 2 and this also ID 2. So you'll just have 3 objects. Each object, let's say object 1 will just have the same values because there was no duplicate in object 1, but this object 2 has ID 2 and this also has ID 2, so it will be only one key of ID 2 and the value of x 10, the value of y 20, because here in this x was 3, then here y was 6, but now here it takes this value of the second array x 10 and y 20, because you have seen up there if it exists you have to override the values. Here you should override the value from array 1. That's what it has done in this example too. Then this ID 3 will just remain the way it is because there's no that key there. So that is how we're supposed to solve this challenge. Let us look at the constraints. So the constraints is array 1 and array 2 are both valid JSON arrays. Then each object in array 1 and 2 has a unique integer ID key. This already saw. Then the length of the array 1, if you convert it into a string, will be between 2 and 10 to the power 6. Also array 2 just the same. The length should be between 2 and 10 power 6. So let us learn some key concepts first, then we solve this challenge. Today we learn about the concept of object methods, and to be specific, we learn about the Object.keys, Object.values, and Object.entries. So let me just, this is an object. Let's say this is an object of student grades. Let's say this, the keys are the subjects, then the grades are the values. You can just adjust these values a little bit so that they cannot be the same. Okay, so the first method that we learn is this Object.keys. I know you already used it before, but let me just repeat. Object.keys returns an array of the object property names. Let us look at an example. Let's say we want to use this object here. I'll just set Object.keys. Then I pass in the name of the object, in this case, grades. So if I log this, let me just log it, console.log. Then if I run this code, I expect in the terminal I see the name of these properties as an array. So let's just wait for it. And you can see indeed I got all the property names in an array. And that is how you use the object.keys. The next one is this object.values. And this object.values returns an array of the object values. So allow me to comment this .keys. Then I just change this one to .values. So I expect now in the console to see these values as an array. So I expect to see an array of 30, 90, and 80. So let me just run this code. And we'll see indeed I got an array of 90, 30, and 80. And that is how you use the object.values. Then lastly, this one called Object.entries. So let me just duplicate this code, then I put it down there and comment this one. So this Object.entries returns an array of key value pair. Object.entries, like that. And each element in the array will be an array. So it will return an array of arrays. So let's just see what is the output. It will contain each property. So each, like this math 90 will be the first array, this will be the second array, this will be the third array, and all of it will just be an array. You can see it's just an array of arrays, and each array contains the properties, key and value, both the key and value. And that is how you use the object.keys, object.values, and object.entries. Now that you know about the object methods, we will use that knowledge and the previous learned knowledge to solve this challenge. So first I'll create a function. I'll call it join, and I'll use the anonymous function syntax like that. Then I told that this function should take in two arguments, that is array 1 and array 2. So I'll just put them there like that. Then I'm expected to return a joint array that is sorted. So first thing that I'll do, I'll first combine these two arrays into one, and I'll store it to a variable. I'll call that variable combined array like that. Combined array. Then I'll have to combine these two arrays into one, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can either use the concat or you can use the spread operator. So I'll just use this spread operator that we learned some time back. So I'll spread these two arrays. Then I'll store them into this variable called combined array. Then what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to loop through this array and check if the key exists. Then if it exists, first I'll be storing them here. So I'll create this variable, I'll call it merged. I'll be storing the data here. Okay, so I'll loop through this combined array. Let me use the for each for today. So I'll use the for each to loop. I know that this for each takes in a callback function, and this callback function you can have access to the item, the index, and the array. But today I'm just using the item alone. I know that each item is an object, so I can just call it obj, because I know that each item is an object. I just told that, let's look at one of the examples here. You know that each item of the array is an object, and each item also has this key called, each object has this key called id. So I can get the key, I can say something like const id is equals to object, each object has this id key. So I can store that into a variable called id. Then I'll be checking if the id exists or not. If it does not exist, I will add it, and if it exists, I'll override it. That was the challenge was saying. So first I'll start to check if it is not there. So I'll say if it does not exist, so I'll put a note. If this, so I'll be storing them in this merged, so I'll check if this merged has that key of id. So if it does not, if this one comes true, it means that it does not have it. So if it does not have it, I want to add it. So I'll say something like merged with that id will be equal to, so I'll just spread that new object there. And we already learned about this spread operator. Okay, but if it is there, I'll put else. If it's there, we need to override it. So I'll say something like merged with that id, if it's there, and to override it. So we know that in a single object, each key must be unique. And if you define the same key multiple times within the same object literal, only the last value assigned will be kept. So I can just spread the object that's already there, that is merged with the ID. I can expand that value, then I add another value like that. So if it's there, I'll just add it. And if I add it, I'll add this new item. And if I add that new item, it will update the existing item, because you know that in the same object literal, each key must be unique. So this one should update there. It will not add a new key with the same key value. It will just update it. So that's what I want to do. Then at the end of the day, I'll now that I have merged, now all the elements will be stored in this merged. But this merged is an object, but we need an array. So you can extract the values from the merged object using the Object.values method that you already learned. So after this for here below here, I can do something like merged now Object.values. I want to get the values from this merged object. Then I'll store that into a variable. I call that variable joint array, like that. Okay, so then I can return the joint array, because that's the only thing that you need to do. That's the only thing that's remaining. Can return joint array. But there was a gotcha here. This should work, but we are told that before you return it, you have to sort it in ascending order. So you can just sort it before you return. You can just sort it. We already learned about how to sort arrays in yesterday's video. We use the sort method. And since this one you're dealing with this, you can use the compare function. So I'll just add my function here, like that. I'll use the arrow function syntax. Since it's that line, I can just omit this. I can omit the brackets. I know that this compare function takes in A and B, and if you want to sort in ascending order, it's just A minus B. We discussed about this yesterday. But in this challenge, you're supposed to sort them according to the ID. And each item has access to the ID. So I can say something like A.id minus B.id, like that. And this one should solve the challenge. Maybe I can just repeat what I did. So I created a function called join, and I used the anonymous function syntax. And this function takes in two parameters, array1 and array2. Then first, we merged the two arrays into a single array and used the spread operator to do that. Then next, we initialized an empty object named merged to store the merged data there. Then we looped through the combined array, and we checked if the ID. First, we got the ID, because you know that each item has this ID key. We already saw in the example, and the challenge says that each item should have this ID key, because you know that each item is an object, and that object will have this ID key. So for each ID, we'll store that into an ID. Then we check if that key exists. If it does not exist, we create it in this line 9. We check if the key in this line 8. We check if the key does not exist. If it does not exist, we create that key, and the value should be this object that we are currently iterating. Then if it exists, we just override it. And we already explained this line while you're writing this code. Then after that, we know that each data is stored in this merged object, but the challenge expects that the results to be an array. That's why we first get the values of this merged object and store it in this joint array. Then we sort that data, then we return the joint array. So you can test it with the example 1 if it works. So I'll just copy this example 1 like that. And below here, I'll just paste it. So I have to declare these two variables. So I'll just declare them with const, like that. Then I can call my function join with array1 and array2, like that. Then I'll log the results. Then if I run, I expect, since there is no unique ID, since there's no duplicate, I expect it to be that way, and that is how it is. We already discussed this example, so that is the expected result. In example 1 can see the expected result is that. So you can try the example 2. This is where the challenge was. Example 2 was the whole idea. So I'll just paste example 2 there. Then I can clear this array 2 with const. Then if I run, I expect now since you have the ID 2 twice, it should override it. So let me run and see if it will override it. And indeed, you'll see that it overrided it. And this ID2 had the values of the last array, 10 and 20. You can see it says 10 and 20. It didn't have this one for 3 and 6. And that is what the challenge expected us to have. So that means our code is working. Maybe you can just try this final example 3, just to make sure that it's just working fine with all the test cases. Okay, let me run with the example 3. I expect to have this output here. What is that output? And that is what we got. Okay, that means that our code worked, and you'll notice that it's similar to what we did in day 23. Let me just open this day 23, and you can see that they are almost the same. So if I just, let me split this screen into 2, then I put the day 23 code here and close it. Yeah, so you can see this is just the same, but here we just use the reduce method. We didn't use the follow, but they're just similar. Here you're checking if the key exists. If it does not exist, we create it and set it into an empty array. If it exists, we push it. We're just doing the same thing here. And also you can just use reduce for this one. So I can just modify this code to use reduce. Then reduce takes in a callback function and a start. So I can just, this start value, I can just put it down here like that as an empty array. Then now this takes in an accumulator and an object. Then you can just, where there is merged, you can just replace with accumulator like this. I'll just that accumulate. Okay. Then this one will return the merged data. I can store that into a variable. So I can just say const merged like that. Then the rest will just remain the same. So maybe we can just test this code of reduce to see that it also works. So I just run this same code. I think there's an error. I didn't see that error. Let me just read. ID. Let me check. Accumulator ID is not there. So I have to return the accumulator first. So after I finish the function here, I'll have to return the accumulator like that. So I hope this one should work. So let me run it again. Fingers crossed. And you can see indeed it worked. So yeah, so you can see that is how you can solve this challenge using the reduce method. And you can use also the for loop. So I can challenge you to solve it using the for loop. That is it with this video. See you in the next video. Peace out.